All right.
Hey, Chris, nice to see you.
Hey, Dennis. Hey, everyone. I'm Chris Cabot. I'm the executive director of the Chebeague and Cumberland Land Trust. Here with Dennis Kiley, who is the founder of the Eco-Psychology Initiative. Just wanted to have a chat. First, I'll introduce CCLT, and then maybe, Dennis, you can introduce yourself, and we can have a conversation about what's going on.
That sounds great.
Good. So the Chebeague and Cumberland Land Trust is one of about 80 land trusts in Maine. We're a member-supported nonprofit land trust. We're accredited through the Land Trust Alliance. And since 1987, we've protected a total of 27 properties, which amounts to about 1,000 acres in our 2 towns. Our work is to protect the natural resources and public benefits, public access opportunities in Chebeague Island and Cumberland. And we do that by protecting land permanently, taking care of those properties and trails that we have protected, and also providing educational opportunities about the natural world in our communities. Dennis is the founder of Eco-Psychology Initiative. He's also a counselor at the College of the Atlantic, with his own private practice, and among many other things, right, Dennis? A yoga instructor, group leader, garlic farmer is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I've been someone who has always worn a number of different hats, and for much of my life, it's felt like my interests have been really disparate. And yet, since starting the Eco-Psychology Initiative, I've found this integration of so much of what I've always enjoyed doing professionally and personally as well.
That's great. And a dad now, too.
Yeah, I'm a dad of 2 kids, and it keeps us on our toes, but it also reminds me of so much of what's important.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to connect with you right now around this time of coronavirus, and it's certainly a time of uncertainty for all of us. And while we're trying to socially distance ourselves to slow that spread of the virus, many of us are thinking that now's a great time to get outside in an appropriate way, and that's so critical for our physical and mental health. So I'd love to hear from you more about what eco-psychology is and what you're doing at the Eco-Psychology Institute.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me on. And I would say that you're absolutely right. Getting outside right now is really critically important. And I would say it is generally regardless of the circumstances, but especially right now. And so eco-psychology generally looks at our relationships and experiences with the natural world and how these can be used to not only foster thriving for ourselves, but fundamentally create a more sustainable and healthy planet as well. And so some of what I'm doing with the Eco-Psychology Initiative is building on this. And so it's helping people have experiences outdoors and change their relationships both with themselves and others, but fundamentally with the planet to foster more of that thriving for themselves and others. But additionally, I'm taking principles from nature and psychology and applying that. So for example, that might be with something like psychological biomimicry, work with organizations to improve their kind of culture and leadership. And then it's other subjects like looking at the psychological impacts of climate change and how we can improve our communications and strategy and otherwise. So the eco-psychology is this broad umbrella, and what we're doing with the initiative is really trying to create healing and regenerative solutions for individuals and communities to address our most pressing subjects. And oftentimes we're not dealing with things like pandemics, but right now we are. And there's this opportunity to really apply nature to benefit our health. And for example, there's a robust amount of research that says that by getting outdoors, it improves our mood, it reduces stress, it enhances our immune system. And so all of those right there, we know are going to be critically important as we deal with a lot of uncertainty, and that there could be a lot of, well, there is already and will be more sickness, that we need healthy immune systems. And one of the ways to do that is to get outdoors. It boosts natural antibodies. We also know that stress is a real impediment for our immune system and our healthy functioning. And finally, there is a number of antibodies, in particular one called IgA, that is associated with positive emotions. And we know that getting outside enhances positive emotions and mood. So I think there's a lot of compelling reasons to get some fresh air. And, I think I just would parenthetically say that the work you're doing with the land trust is so important in giving people these spaces that they can get out and take advantage of the natural world.
Great, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, I do think it's probably important to note that it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a mountain that you're scaling. It can be time just in your yard. Do you have a comment about how even 5 or 10 minutes outside can be helpful?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Chris, because there's a lot of misunderstandings that, I need to be climbing a mountain, and it's not true. In fact, the research has shown that even just looking at pictures of nature on a screensaver started to have mental benefit and reduced stress and taxation. So as you said, just getting 5 minutes to be near a tree or in your own backyard can have enormous benefits, not to mention like some of the land trusts. They don't have to be hundreds of miles away from people. Just getting some fresh air goes a really long way, as I said, in benefiting just kind of like total whole health. And even just a couple of minutes of it can go a huge distance.
That's great. And I think it is challenging right now with everything that's going on, and with all the online connecting that kids are doing right now, trying to stay involved with their classmates in school online. I know I'm seeing that in my kids, but trying to the screen time can be important, but also putting that computer device down and getting outside, so critical right now.
Yeah, I think so. We do know that nature works with the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us to reduce our heart rate and blood pressure. In other words, it's a great antibody, so to speak, for stress and anxiety. And I think so many people right now are feeling huge amounts of anxiety as it's happening, just generally the pandemic, but also spending so much time in front of screens. And then we get stuck up in our heads and it just spirals and swirls even more. So without it even being intentional or conscious, just by getting outdoors, we naturally just start to calm down and relax a lot more. Not to mention that it's been shown that being outside improves relationships. And so even if you got to force your kids to step away from the iPad or the iPhone or whatever it might be, like just getting outdoors in and of itself can bring people closer. Not to mention, as I said, it reduces anxiety and stress and has a number of other benefits.
That's great. So a couple ways people in Cumberland and Chebeague Island can access protected lands is by logging on to our website, ccltmaine.org. If you're not in Chebeague Island or Cumberland, you can find your local land trust through the Maine Land Trust Network at mltn.org. Another great site that I really love is the Maine Trail Finder. It's got trails all across the state. Find good ways to get outside. Connect with the state of Maine has quite a few state properties we can get to. Or reach out to your local Parks and Rec department. And like we said, just getting out to your own yard or garden, really critical right now.
Chris, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a question. So a lot of my audience is more global and isn't necessarily just in Maine. And so I'm curious if you have any resources or suggestions of people for how they might find natural spaces near them, if there's like a national registry of land trusts or otherwise that you know of, or just any other suggestions you might have for those who might not be in Maine specifically.
Yeah, I would just suggest Googling your town name and land trust, and I imagine you'll be able to find it that way. If not, the Land Trust Alliance is the nationally accrediting body for land trusts, so you could search that way if you can't find yours locally. I imagine somebody in the town office would know who to connect with or where properties are that your town might own. So other resources out there, and the National Park System may have some links too.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of the number of land trusts or parks or open communal spaces that are accessible to them. And so I really encourage people being proactive. And, here in Maine, we're fortunate to have organizations like Chris is leading that really make it a lot easier for us and give us, enormous outdoor access and resources. But, they're available throughout our country and globe, and encourage people to really seek those out.
That's great. Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Well, I'm so glad